What was the most weird or terrifying confession you heard from someone that was drunk? Story 1. She had a major eating disorder. Once we went to see a movie loaded drunk, and she threw up in her popcorn and tried to convince me it wasn't a big deal, and we didn't have to leave because she would have just thrown it up later anyways. I had to practically carry her home. She abused laxatives constantly and would mix fiber supplements in with her alcohol. She was also tremendously abusive to her parents and tried to manipulate me into feeling bad about myself occasionally, which was the main reason I stopped being her friend and moved out after not even a full year of living with her. A few years after I'd stopped living with her, she called a mutual friend of ours drunkenly while he was hanging out with me, saying she was drunk on the side of the road. I told him he could go pick her up and bring her back if he wanted. Turns out she was with her fiancé the whole time, and they were on the side of the road because a friend of theirs was trying to hit on her. She kept drunkenly talking about how this friend was into her and how surprising it was, and trying to get us to reaffirm that this girl had a crush on her, and going over and over all the things that indicated this girl wanted to bed her, all in front of her fiancé, who was just quietly sitting there looking incredibly uncomfortable. At one point, she actually got to the point where she was asking, "Why shouldn't I date X name?" And just bluntly said, I don't know, because you're freaking engaged to someone else? Her fiancé was just sitting there right beside her the whole time. It was at that point that our mutual friend suggested he drive them both home. Probably he could tell I was a bit upset on behalf of the fiancé. When her fiancé tried to help her get up and get her shoes on, she started screaming at her not to touch her, clawing at her arm with her long nails, saying that she wanted our mutual friend to do it because she loved him, and talking about how they could have had a beautiful future together. I'll never forget her fiancé's expression as she followed her down the road to get into our mutual friend's car. She was livid. She was mouthing to herself, "Shrew, shrew, you freaking shrew," over and over again because she clearly didn't feel like she could stand up to her. They kept dating for at least 3 years after that. A couple of the fiancé's friends even told me they had set up an emergency signal in case she ever decided to get out. In the end, it took moving to a different province and getting her career on track before she finally ended things. I have no idea who the original person is or what she's doing. Last I heard, she was briefly hospitalized for something liver-related at 26 years old because of how hard she's treating her body. Even though she seems like such a spiteful and manipulative person, I honestly can only feel sorry for her, because I know it's because of her really messed up past. I hope she gets help someday. Man, she sounds like she's in a ton of pain. Good for you for removing yourself. I've known people like this, and no matter how well-intentioned you are, you will be collateral damage until they take responsibility for their problems. I hope she gets help. This situation is such a double-edged sword. This person is so beyond help that it's best to get out of their way, or else you'll become collateral damage, just like the person said. On the other hand, they need someone that will stick with them and help them realize that they need help. It would take someone of immense strength to be that person. That and a lot of patience. I hope this person finds that kind of person to help them through this dark period. Story 2. I went to a dart tournament with an old college buddy last year who's now married. Anyways, he hit it off with his fellow finalist who also happened to be sporting a wedding ring. The two got so plastered on the free drinks they won that soon the talk of tungsten shafts de-evolved into them having their tongues in one another with her hand on his shaft. She took an Uber to the bar, so my friend decided to be a gentleman, tosses me the keys to his Tahoe, and says we can drop her off. So he folds down the rear passenger seats and lays down a few blankets in the back for the drive. I try not to watch, but hey, sometimes a designated driver has to use the rearview mirror, and it was pretty clear they were reciprocating in the back. When I confronted my friend about his infidelity after we dropped her off, he confessed that it ain't cheating if you're both eating. But how can you do that? The dude was too drunk to realize I was referring to his presumed guilty conscience, and instead provided me with a step-by-step guide on how I could also learn to neg women and speedily seduce them into reciprocating in the back of my ride. It was terrifying someone was still quoting The Game in 2018. Grossest story in this thread. I can't believe they made you drive the reciprocating vehicle. That is a hard position to be in. The driver, not the other two. Did he drive out of a sense of obligation for his friend? Couldn't he have just offered to pay for an Uber for them? Maybe that might have mitigated the circumstances. Maybe they might not have done what they did. But then you're passing off the situation to an Uber driver who's probably going to have to report them for having that kind of behavior in his car. It wouldn't be fair to that guy. Story 3. Last night, I was at a comedy club. It was the 9 to 11 set, done late enough that most people had probably had dinner and some pre-show drinks. The one couple was seated at the front, center table, literally at the base of the mic stand. Through 3 different comedians, he's hooting and hollering, clapping at everything, laughing at jokes during the setup, etc. Classic drunk distraction. So finally, the 3rd comedian decides to lay into him a bit. He claims to have been together with the woman for 20 years. She corrects him, 6 months. When asked about his job, he claims to be in the miracle business. She corrects, real estate. When asked about having troubles in relationships, he offers, brags really, that he went to prison for 3 years for selling 200 pounds of magic lettuce each month. Sure, a bit awkward this drunk jerk is hijacking the show to talk about selling substances at wholesale. As the comic is figuring out where to take this, the drunk guy follows up, "Don't worry. Prison was easy because I was willing to violate them, and I never had any time either." That's not the brag you think it is. I wonder if some of these people are aware of what they're like when they're drunk. You would think some people had already spilled some sensitive information before and might want to take it easy a bit this time around. Yes, I know we're dealing with an addictive substance here. Still, maybe have some people warn you, or maybe set up a signal with somebody. Have them help you lay off before you say something you'll regret. Story 4. My uncle, who has always been an oasis of sanity and understanding in my family, got super freaking drunk and told me he doesn't really care about anyone, not even me, and that he fantasizes constantly about unaliving everyone he loves, starting with the people closest to him first. He would take his time doing it. I told him he'd been winning the fight against those thoughts every day for 40 years, and he'd been 100% successful so far, and tried to change the topic. He started laughing and started carrying on about how fun it would be to give in to those urges and how no one would be able to stop him, and he got so excited by it that he had to go sit out in the sub-zero weather at 3 a.m. on the porch for a couple of minutes to calm down. He was really graphic with what he wanted to do to his sister, my mom, and told me that when he lived with my grandmother, he would sometimes stand over her while she slept, thinking of how much he hated being around her and wishing he could smother her. He has had waking blackouts in the past, so I took this issue to my parents, who have dealt with it before and haven't really been close to him since. I think he doesn't remember telling me any of this. Holy hell, I'd move far, far away and change my name. I also have a super chill uncle that I adore, and I'm trying to picture hearing him say this, and it's chilling. You're wondering if this is a situation that would end poorly. Did anyone try to confront this guy afterward? I don't think this is one of those situations where you can just ignore it, especially if this guy likes drinking a lot. At least set up an intervention. Safety in numbers against this guy. Maybe that might help him get the help he needs. Story 5. This is a doozy. I was about 22 and went out drinking with my coworker who was the same age. We're both women, and she asked me if I ever looked at corn. I said, sure. She said she'd stumbled across some child corn, and it confused her because the kids looked like they enjoyed it. So she looked up more to find out if it was really so bad. I freaked out and tried to explain that it was illegal to look at, and that children can experience that kind of pleasure while being damaged. She clearly thought she was just innocently researching the subject, and didn't seem to understand why I was so upset. An older coworker we both liked and trusted explained the same thing to her. I have no idea if she was a pea person, or just didn't get why looking at child corn for any reason is bad, outside of law enforcement. 10 years later, I'm still wary of coworkers. Some things you're better off not knowing. This made me feel a bit sick. Story 6. Once, a dude wearing a Tigger costume walked into a Halloween house party I was in. It was like 4 a.m., so we were all already smashed. He sat on my lap and tried to convince me that I am a trans guy and should transition and date him. Then he told me in detail how he violently hates his mom and exactly how he would like to unalive and dismember her. He then also tried to convince me that I hate my mother, I do not, and I should unalive her. When I said no, he yelled at me, left through the front door, and threw himself down the stairs. He was fine. Gotta love a guy who makes a splashy entrance, exit, with a lot of compelling conversation in between. Story 7. I work at a bar, and our staff had a huge problem with H substance a couple years ago. It was to the point that management was regularly having to sweep the bathroom for needles. Anyway, one of the guys was a friend of mine, and I thought he was an overall good guy despite his crippling addiction. One night, we were having a few drinks after work, and he got a little too drunk and admitted that a couple months prior, he had bought stuff from someone he didn't know and didn't trust, so he called up a girl he'd used with before and told her he had some stuff and could he come over. He let her go first, and she immediately had a terrible reaction to whatever was in the substance, seizing and ODing in front of him. He left her house without notifying the police or trying to help. He OD'd himself a couple months after. Holy hell. So not only did he use her to test his substances, he didn't even call it in when she OD'd. True scum of the earth behavior. Yep, and I was totally wrong about him. He always talked about getting clean and having plans, but when he told me that, I knew he was too far gone. This is one of those situations where, again, he needs help and have someone to tell him that he needs help. But it's also true that he is just too far gone that the better option is just to stay away from him. It's tragic when something like this takes over someone's life so much that's all they care about over other people, over other real living people. He should probably at least get banned from the bar. I think someone should tell him what he told everybody. Story 8. Not me, but a friend. He was out with a girl he didn't know too well, and they got drunk. She said she was initiated into a gang. They just collected stray people they didn't know, took them to a warehouse, beat them up, and when they were thoroughly beaten and broken down, she and the other recruits administered an overdose of H substance, killing them. There are weird people out there. You need to be careful. Gang initiation for women is usually different. That's fine, but I see it says motorcycle gangs. Makes sense. This girl was a spicy entertainer. Didn't have just a lot going for her, and I doubt it was a motorcycle gang. In Illinois, we're plagued with generic gang activity that usually originates from Chicago and is infecting central Illinois. Peoria, Bloomington, normal. No motorcycles, just unaliving, violence, and scum. The police aren't doing much to stop its spread. Story 9. I had a neighbor. She was young and a serious alcoholic. She'd been a nurse before I met her, but was under some type of investigation because pills at her job had gone missing. One night she was super drunk and told me that she had put pillows over some of the elderly patients' faces and suffocated them because she couldn't stand to see them suffer anymore. Bed sores and just in pain. I asked her about it when she'd sobered up and she denied saying that to me. She passed away about 3 years ago, so I'll never know if what she said was true. She sounds like an angel of unaliving, which is, I believe, one of the 6 classifications of serial unalivers. Story 10. My parents were both drunk and got in a fight which escalated their emotions, apparently. And my stepdad had a mental breakdown due to the situation and came in my room to vent about it, and basically admitted to me that when he was 16, he got a girl pregnant, and they had my stepbrother, and choked her during an argument. She didn't press charges because her mother said, "Don't ruin his life over it," so that's how he got away with it. After that, he started talking about how he's actually unalived people and how he's really about that life. Spent his teenage years hustling and selling substances and never got caught because he had a fake ID or some stuff. All the years I've known this guy, we barely talked, and he threw all of this at me one random night when I barely knew what was going on. Homer backing into Bush.gif. This is one of those so you think you know someone situations. It's awful that he had to discover this while he was vulnerable in bed. I'd almost want to get away from him just as soon as I possibly could. Find anyone to bunk with. Anyone as far away from this person as possible. I guess there's the mother to consider too. Story 11. My male best friend at the time confessed to me while drunk that he wanted to abuse my female best friend and that just the idea of it made him hard. Since the only way to get to her was with my help, he insisted that it would be great for us 3 to go to a separate room. We were at a party. He said that while he was with her, I could either watch or join them since I was also pretty bettable. Of course, I told him to go to hell. I grabbed my best friend and we both left the party. Needless to say, I broke ties with him and he can't get close to us. The three of us were 17 at the time. That's messed up, dude. Do you have any idea what he's up to now? Story 12. Was on leave from the army with some mates and met a fellow from an adjacent unit. We all proceeded to get good and drunk when the fellow from the other unit told us about how he fabricated an after-action report because he had unalived a local and reported that he felt threatened. We discussed it the next day when sobering up and ran it up the chain of command. Turns out he never actually did what he claimed to do, but was probably thinking about it and described his plan to us in a way that made it sound like he'd already done it. About 2 weeks later, Scuttlebutt said that he was quietly sent to another base for reasons. So Jack Reacher was right. Story 13. Bartender here. So many stories. Probably the most terrifying is the woman who came into my bar years ago and had 2 shots and a drink and was really quiet for the first hour. Then she called me over and asked if I could call the police. I said what was the problem. She then told me that she had just stabbed and sliced the neck of a mugger in the alley and wanted to make sure he was unalive first before she reported it. Note: police were called, mugger found unalive, woman not arrested or charged. She denied ever telling me that she wanted to wait an hour before calling the police, claimed that she had passed out in the alley and woke up, then came into the bar in shock. Holy hell, how did she manage to overpower and unalive a mugger? Fight response overtakes flight response. Kind of tragic all the way around. It depends on what this mugger's past was like. You don't know what to expect when you confront someone. Just because someone's smaller than you doesn't mean they can't mess you up. Story 14. When I was 16, I had a job as a dishwasher at a local bar, so being around drunk people was sort of the norm for me. Though one day, Steve, who is like a 50-something-year-old guy who works in the kitchen with me, comes in and gets drunk on his day off. No big deal. Go ahead. It got weird, though, when he came into the kitchen and cried to me about how his boyfriend left him and how good I could make him feel if I gave him a quick oral spicy time. Of course, this caught me way off guard as I was 16 and I'm not even homosexual, so I just left the kitchen and found other stuff to do. I didn't really want to talk to Steve after that. I quit the job shortly after anyway. Story 15. Drunk at a block party, our next-door neighbor admitted she was abused as a kid and tried to get physical with my husband within the span of half an hour. I don't know if she remembers. How did you react? I just walked away with my husband and wasn't surprised. The family situation seemed to be kind of a hot mess from the moment they moved in. Sad for her that she's been a victim. Story 16. Was making out with a drunk girl and she said she wanted to smash and she said she was on birth control. We didn't smash because I didn't want to have spicy time with a drunk girl. 2 weeks later, we're both sober and she wants to hook up, but she wasn't on birth control, so I had to get condoms. Later on that night, she told me she hasn't been on birth control in months. Scared the hell out of me. Bullet dodged because you're a decent human being. Good job. Yep, that is probably the best possible scenario that could happen there. Good job for not taking advantage of someone. It turned out they probably would have taken advantage of you. Maybe nothing would have happened from it. Maybe everything would have happened because of it. Definitely made the right decision there. Story 17. My friend drunkenly told me his mother abused him when he was a kid, and I'm the only person who ever knows. Instantly understood why sometimes he doesn't want to be at home alone with his mom at times. Your poor friend. His mother should be locked away. Yes, she should. It happened around 15 years ago, but he's hid it very well considering the only way I found out is because he was hammered. Story 18. That they steal money from passed-out drunk hookups. That's the last time this person came to hang out at my place. My ex-boyfriend told me one night, he moved here from Vietnam when he was 14, that his cousin is a gay spicy worker and would fly to Hong Kong periodically to make bank. He'd slip something in his John's drink at the bar to make them go to sleep just before heading to the hotel room. They'd get to the hotel room, John would end up falling asleep, he'd empty out the wallet and take off. Story 19. So not terrifying at all, but weird. Met a guy who had a freaking sweet home. Had a horde of futuristic tech, including a fingerprint-reading front door lock. Considering this was like 10 years ago and it wasn't a rich area, it was a big deal. He drunkenly told me he got paid a six-figure salary to go into huge multinational companies and tell them what looked bad. He didn't even have to say what to do. He wouldn't tell me how I could also do this job. At least he let me play Halo on his 100-inch or something TV. Weird, but the best kind of weird you could get from a drunk person. Very weird flex. Amazing that even while he was still drunk and bragging, he still wouldn't reveal the secret of how we could get into this game. Maybe he wasn't all that drunk after all. I still want to know exactly what kind of job this guy did. I'm really curious. Story 20. One guy finding out that his real biological parents are twins when his mom says something while drunk. I imagine the parents being Ryan and Sharpay Evans from High School Musical, who have already become famous actors who have come out about being siblings who raise a family. And the original person in that post would be their son. It would make sense if they were royals with a big bed. They put two twins together to make a king. Story 21. My friend of 20 years broke into the middle of a bar and told me a guy from our high school class assaulted her at a party in 10th grade, and none of us heard her cry from the room upstairs. This happened to me once, by 3 or 5 dudes at once. Still haven't told anyone. I'm too scared not to be believed. I think it's my scariest memory. It still gives me panic attacks if I think of it and don't immediately distract myself with different thoughts or actions. Story 22. Not long after my friend was outside for a smoke at a small house party, and a girlfriend of a mutual friend came up to him and decided to let him know that she had gotten an abortion earlier that week. She didn't even introduce herself, just went straight to that. She had to vent. This is why I don't drink. Not only will I say stuff I know I'm supposed to keep quiet, I'll end up saying it to someone I don't even know. You think you're being friendly by opening up about something. We forget that alcohol, while making us uninhibited, also removes our usual social filters. Stuff that we desperately need in everyday life. Story 23. Freshers Week at uni. A lot of drinking on a pub crawl leads me to making friends with a lady. In bed with said lady friend, postcoital pillow talk, my grandfather was in the SS. Not what I expected at Berkshire University that shall remain nameless. Easy, Tigger. NZ ties are strictly second date material. To call it a date is to overstate the romance involved in a British University Freshers Week. Story 24. Drunk girl that was hitting on me randomly went on a rant that it was unfair that her friend has slept with 30-odd people and was STD-free, yet she had only slept with like 15 and ended up with herpes. I mean, what was I meant to do with that? Butt spicy time. Story 25. I know you'll never love me. I wish I had done you that time we were alone in a room, while we were both drunk and kinda alone at another party. That's the strangest combination of courage and low self-esteem I've ever heard of. Are you still in contact? That's so threatening. I don't think they should be in contact. That's far too threatening. It sounds more like there was a plan of assault. That weird combination is just too creepy. You just need to stay away from this person for the vibes they give off alone. Story 26. My now ex-girlfriend confessed to having to wipe my butt after I drunkenly took a dump during post-21st birthday shenanigans. Amuses me now, but I was embarrassed for a long time after. I read a post on relationship advice not long ago where a guy said his girl always blacks out and pooped herself one time. He cleaned her up. Didn't know if he should tell her. Story 27. My ex-boyfriend told me that his high school girlfriend was assaulted by her doctor. He burned that doctor's office to the ground in the middle of the night. This sounds like the type of thing a pathological liar says to make themselves seem heroic. I'd have to agree with that one. That doesn't sound like a confession more than a story. Guy sounds like he's trying to game the system a bit. I wonder if that's a new line or if he tried it out before. If he's tried it out before, I wonder if he's ever been successful with it. I'd be creeped out if it did. Story 28. Casually mentioning that an ex-boyfriend assaulted her, then promptly attempted to assault me. You could say I was caught off guard. Abused people often become abusers. It's a very unfortunate cycle. Story 29. About clipping a mailbox with their car while drunk, only to discover that it was really a dog in a mailbox costume. What? Story 30. I heard you have the biggest equipment from your friend group. just because I don't have any friends. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.